Welcome everyone to the Sephirah Center of Shamanism, where we break down the ancient esoteric practices of shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the deep psyche. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you for joining me once again. Be sure to find me over on Patreon, second link within the description of this video, gain access at just £20 per month, and find lots of potent pieces of exclusive content relating to shamanism and the occult. You will find full initiatory systems on this Patreon through some of the most powerful and advanced methods of occult initiation, such as the Qlipoth, the Sephiroth, the Necronomicon, angel magic, demon magic, dragon magic, many other things, with new content being uploaded multiple times each week. I look forward to seeing you over there. So I've been requested by a few different people now to make a concise video about Cabala. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in two parts, starting with the Tree of Life, the Sephiroth, today. So I'm going to be explaining the initiatory process through the Sephiroth, the Tree of Life, from the perspective of Occult Qabalah, which is the most powerful method of initiation that you can use, because you are literally merging your consciousness with the different regions of the tree in order to be exposed to its potent and raw transmutation and alchemical process. So I'm going to be breaking down the different stages of the initiation through the different spheres, through the abyss, and ultimately explaining what the overall purpose of this initiatory process is and what it can bring to your evolutionary process. I'm also going to be touching on the initiation through the pathways that comes after the spheres, as well as trans-Sephirothic initiation, which will take you beyond the tree structure itself. So definitely stay tuned as we dive in to helping you understand the Sephiroth, the Tree of Life, within the space of 30 minutes. First and foremost, the Sephiroth/Tree of Life is an immensely adaptable system of initiation that is not actually limited by any predefined paradigm. However, it will adapt itself to the given paradigm in which you are projecting into it, which means if I approached it from a Christian standpoint, the tree would mold itself to that. If I approached it from a Judaic standpoint, the tree would mold itself to that. The same if I approach it from an occult standpoint. There are some traditions that don't even see the Tree of Life as a system of initiation and more of a framework of study. Traditionally, the Tree of Life was found within Judaism predominantly, but I feel it goes back much further than that, way back to the ancient civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria, simply because what we are working with here from an occult lens anyway are ancient planetary gateways, and the Tree of Life itself, which I will show here, is only one framework, one diagram of these different planetary gateways. The practice of working with cosmic intelligence and working with the different planets is an ancient occult practice that goes back to way before any of our time. So for this reason, the Tree of Life itself is not actually limited to any predefined paradigm, which is why it is important to discern your reason for going into it and what method you actually use. Now, if you use, say, a Cabala school, which is a valid approach, then you are only going to be exposed to the concentration/vibration of the energies in which the school is basically filtering through. Okay, this basically means that each paradigm acts as a filter for the cosmic energies that are held within the tree, whereas if you approach it from a self-initiatory perspective, via Occult Qabalah, this is immensely powerful simply because not only are you merging your consciousness with each portion of the tree and not metaphorically bringing the energy into you, but literally bringing the energy into your body and into your day-to-day life to trigger a transmutation process, you are also approaching it yourself, which means that the energies are not being filtered through anything, which means that this approach can be more intense and potentially disorientating for those who may not be prepared for the initiatory process. But again, discern. One method is not going to be the best option for every individual. It really depends. But if you're wanting to get into this from an occult standpoint, to understand your true will, to understand your higher self, then I do recommend occult-based self-initiation. But it's highly individual and up to you. So what is the purpose of this diagram? What is the purpose of the Tree of Life as an initiatory system? The purpose is actually very, very simple, and that is to connect to your true will. The Tree of Life is all about connecting to your true will, merging your consciousness with your higher self. This is the purpose if you are approaching it from a self-initiatory lens of Occult Qabalah. Whereas if you approached it from a Christian lens, you could interpret that as being understanding God more, understanding your oneness with God, if you are to interpret it in a Christian standpoint. Okay, so again, extremely adaptable. When we are approaching this initiation, the purpose is very simple: to journey back to oneness, to journey back to unity, and understand our true will, anchor our higher self-gnosis into our physical, tangible experience, which is an immense initiatory path. So with each of these spheres, each one holds unique evolutionary potential. When we say Sephiroth, Sephirah means emanation, and we are referring specifically to these 10 spheres here. So if I break them down from an emanation standpoint so that you can understand the function of each sphere and how it shapes the world that we are living within. So we have Kether, which is oneness. What forms Kether are veils of negative existence that come together to cultivate oneness. Oneness is that lonely existence that doesn't know itself, and that is represented by Kether. So Kether, being the top sphere, then has to understand itself. So in order to do that, it has to separate from oneness into density. The whole lesson behind the Tree of Life is that density is the key to evolution. In other words, we would not have been able to evolve at the capacity that we are able to and that we have the opportunity to without coming into density, into a physical, tangible body. So Kether basically echoes itself. Every other sphere that you see here is held within Kether because it is a product of Kether. Kether echoes itself, and each sphere echoes itself into the sphere that comes after it, which means that each sphere that is before holds the spheres that are below it. So Kether holds all of the other spheres. The next one, Hokmah, that is just further down from Kether, holds all of the spheres that are below that. Binar, all of the spheres that are below that, and so on and so forth. A bit like those dolls, I can never remember the name of them, whereby one is stored within the other and that one is stored within another one. Makes sense? So, Kether is the oneness that has to get to know itself, so it separates itself. The first product of that separation is pure unregulated wisdom. So in order to get to know itself, Kether has to thrust itself into existence, into manifestation. So that is represented by Hokmah, which is known as the divine masculine, which is the pure unregulated wisdom that is thrusted into the cosmos, creating manifestation. Okay, the wisdom is what creates, manifests reality itself. But wisdom without conception and understanding is not able to take definitive form. So if Hokmah is the divine masculine that thrusts wisdom into the cosmos and manifests reality itself, then Binar, which is the divine feminine, is what then conceives that wisdom, applies structure, form, and breaks, and then holds reality in the womb space. So you can see Kether as being the influx that then has to get to know itself by thrusting wisdom into the cosmos, cultivating existence, and that wisdom then has to move into a womb space, okay? Bit like a child which is being conceived, okay? The child has to be conceived, the masculine thrusts into the feminine, and then moves into that womb space, okay? The divine essence, the unregulated wisdom, then gets moved into the womb space to be held in gestation before it manifests the baby, the product of creation itself. So these three spheres make up the Supernal Triad, which are the building blocks of higher existence, which basically means the building blocks of either God or, in occult standpoint, would be the building blocks of the higher self. So the Supernal Triad is the higher self. So altogether, these three spheres make up the higher self, which then project themselves down into all of the lower Sephiroth. So if the Supernal Triad, which are these three spheres, are the higher self, then the spheres that are below it represent the different qualities of the lower self. And what separates them is a chasm, which I will show here. This chasm is known as the abyss, also known as the hidden sphere of Darth. The hidden sphere of Darth basically represents the threshold that separates the higher self from the lower self. In the context of separation from the higher self's perspective, this is a mirror. The higher self looks into a mirror, learns how to identify with the reflection that is looking back at the source, but not actually the source that is perceiving the mirror. At which point, consciousness is projected into that reflection. So if you see the Supernal Triad, these top three spheres, as being the higher self, as being the person / the source that is looking into the mirror, see the chasm as the mirror itself, and then see all of the other spheres that are below it as the reflection, the personas that shape the multiverse, that shape each of our individual identities. So when that gets projected down, it moves into all of these different personas, which are represented by the 7 lower spheres. So it starts by emanating itself down into Chesed. What Chesed basically is the ever-flowing river of love, compassion, and kindness. The fact that Chesed is birthed from Binah, the Divine Mother, is basically representative of the fact that the Divine Mother loves its creation unconditionally, maternally. Chesed represents that ever-flowing river of love, compassion, and kindness, and is basically where conscious love is generated from within the universe itself. That then moves across, a bit like how Chokmah, the divine masculine, moves into the divine feminine to have breaks in understanding and comprehension applied to unregulated wisdom. This happens in the same way with Chesed into its counterpart, which is Geburah. Now, Chesed then moves across into Geburah, which is pure strength. Geburah represents strength, boundaries, and, in a sense, narcissism and limitation, whereas Chesed represents the empath. Okay, ever-flowing river of love, compassion, and kindness, but that is not sustainable without boundaries and structure that is brought by its counterpart, which is Geburah, the sphere of strength. So we have Chesed and Geburah that form these different polarities. These then emanate themselves down into the beauty that sits at the center of creation, when you basically have the divine feminine, the divine masculine, or should I say strength and mercy, or understanding and wisdom. You get the child of the creator consciousness being the Christ consciousness. Now, this is not a religious context in any way whatsoever. What the Christ consciousness really means within this specific context is actually something very, very simple. The Christ consciousness represents the divine incarnate that we are all connected to, the divine incarnate, the incarnated God self. You will see here that the middle sphere of Tifereth basically represents the middle of the tree, and you will see that both Geburah and Chesed link into it, and also the divine masculine of Chokmah and Binah also link diagonally into it as well, which is symbolic of it being the child of the divine masculine and feminine. This is where beauty is cultivated through the balance of opposing forces, the balance of strength and mercy. That then emanates itself down, separates itself further, and cultivates splendor. Okay, no, not splendor, got them confused. Cultivates victory. From beauty comes the victory, the celebration of that beauty, of that creation, which is representative of Netzach, which is the Venusian sphere. And Netzach represents that ever-flowing essence of creative potential. From beauty comes creative potential and comes the path of the artist, okay, where consciousness begins to properly comprehend itself on an emotional level. That then moves across, much like how Chesed moves into Geburah to have breaks applied to it. That ever-flowing essence of creative potential moves from Netzach into Hod, which is splendor. And Hod applies logic, reason, and analysis to that creative expression, bringing it into balance. Both of those then emanate into the foundation of the physical experience, which is the astral plane, represented by Yesod, before it then cultivates Malkuth, which is the physical, tangible experience. So each of these spheres is a planetary gate that is ruled over by a specific angelic intelligence. So the process of initiation is the opposite. Okay, that what I just showed you is the process of separation. So when you are initiating into the tree, you reverse the process. You start by initiating into Malkuth, whereby you learn that everything is relating to the physical vessel of existence and how you have to exist within the physical, tangible experience in order to evolve. So you get trials that anchor you to your physical experience, teaching you how to use the physical world as a vessel of transformation. You then move up to Yesod, whereby you are then learning to master the foundation of the experience. The Yesod is the astral plane, ruled by Archangel Gabriel. This is the lunar sphere, the moon sphere, which is representative of the subconscious mind, learning how to master the subconscious mind, learning what the subconscious mind is in terms of the different beliefs and patterns that are influencing the cultivation of reality, ruled by Gabriel. So these two go hand in hand. You can see Malkuth, ruled by Sandalphon, as being the manifestation of Yesod itself. And then you can see Yesod as being the pre-constructed architecture of Malkuth before it filters into tangible experience. So Malkuth is ruled by Sandalphon, is the earth sphere. Yesod is ruled by Gabriel, which is the lunar sphere, and the foundation of the physical experience. And then we have Hod, which is ruled by Michael, the mercurial sphere, whereby you learn how to embrace the path of the scholar. Logic, reason, intellect, and where that fits into your evolutionary path. We then have Netzach, which is representative of creative flow and emotions, whereby you are learning how to master the Venusian essence, which is the path of the artist. So you can see how the spheres that are directly opposite each other balance each other out perfectly. Hod being logic, reason, and analysis, perfectly balances Netzach, and Netzach perfectly balances Hod by bringing the path of the artist, the scholar and the artist, logic, reason, and analysis, creativity, emotions, and expression. We then move up. Okay, we move up from Netzach, which is ruled by Archangel Haniel. We move up to Tifreth, which is ruled by Archangel Raphael. And this is the solar sphere, the sun that sits at the center of our solar system itself. This is where you receive trials of illumination, but also discernment to see past false illumination and illusion of grandeur. You are merging with the Christ consciousness, and you're being taught how to embody the equilibrium between spirit and the physical plane of existence, and the embodiment of responsibility, and the responsibility it requires to carry the divine essence into your physical experience. We then move up to Geburah, the Mars sphere, ruled by Archangel Camael, where we learn how to apply effective boundaries, we embrace sacred fire, maybe even rage, and learn how to serve ourselves, purify blockages, and ultimately learn how to serve ourselves. We then move into Chesed, which brings that perfectly into balance by helping us to embody love, compassion, kindness, and right action. So Chesed is ruled by Archangel Zadkiel and is the Jupiterian sphere, which is all about abundance and love, whereas Mars is very fiery, warlike energy. Okay, so you can see Gebura being Mars, that's the narcissist, and then you've got Chesed being Jupiter, that is the empath. We then have to cross the threshold. So once we have initiated through each of the lower 7 spheres, we are basically going through a transmutation process of mastering these different aspects of ourselves, these different personas of our lower self. We then move into Darth, which is the ultimate dispersion, the ultimate ego death. Darth is like you are approaching yourself, you're approaching the mirror, the veil that is separating you from your higher self. It's like you're looking at yourself in the mirror, taking a hammer, smashing the mirror, and watching your sense of self fracture into lots of different pieces, whereby you become aware of the different personas that you've been carrying, and you have to experience the dispersion of those personas. This is the ultimate death of your predefined identity structure that has been built from karma. In other words, what you are witnessing in Darth is the death of pre-constructed karma. Now, Darth is the liminal gate that actually connects the tree of life to the tree of death. Okay, the Darth basically in the Sephirothic context gives you the equivalent of a trial of what Qliphothic energy is really capable of, which is the dark side of the tree of life, the tree of death. Darth is that threshold in which you face the beast of 666, Shugal Karonzon, who is the personification of the outdated and false aspects of the ego, that is there specifically to rupture your predefined identity that has been built from something that you didn't choose. Before you enter Darth, everything that you do is feeding your predefined identity structure. Before you enter Darth, literally everything that you are doing is feeding your identity, a persona that you are carrying, and a persona that you haven't actually chosen, a persona that has been built from past lack and often trauma and obligation. So when you go through Darth, you witness that rupture of the reflection of your predefined identity, and you have to witness its shattering. It is a very big, very dense, very powerful initiatory process. Some versions of the Tree of Life don't even include Darth, and in my view, that's completely absurd, because how can you tap into the higher aspects of self without going through that dispersion process? There's simply no space for that new aspect of self to be born. So the lower 7 spheres are only the foundations. Darth is the transformation point where your old identity is completely ripped apart, completely ruptured, and by the time you reach the end of Darth and you move into the Supernal Triad, into Binah, you're not going to have any idea why you're doing this work. I mean, you may have a bit of an idea, but it's not going to make much sense, is what I'm trying to say, because you've just gone through a big disorientating ego death, at which point you then have to move into Binah in order to move into a place of gestation. Okay, your soul moves into Binah, into the divine womb, where you are taught patience and silence. Okay, what's on the other side of that abyss is nothing yet. Okay, nothing that is actually predefined. What's on the other side of that abyss is the opportunity to comprehend, the opportunity to let your new self grow, and that is representative of Binah, which is the Saturnian sphere, ruled by Zadkiel. Being Saturnian in nature, the trials here are quite dense, quite slow, time can slow down, there's a lot of karmic reckoning. You really have to embrace that patience of letting your new self gestate, okay, the art of gestation. When you master the qualities of Binah and you spend a certain amount of time in that sphere, you then move into Hokmah, which is where you really start to experience the benefits of manifestation and you experience often gnosis of the higher self when you get into Hokmar. Okay, Hokmar is the Uranian sphere ruled by Raziel, the Keeper of Secrets, and this is where you gain deeper knowledge and insight into the essence and flow of your soul. Hokmar is a very powerful, very tangible sphere that feels like lightning energy coming through the system, and you start to get immense downloads, and you really start to, how do I describe it, reap the benefits of the previous initiatory process. Whereas the last two spheres have been quite disorientating, Hokmar moves you into that space of allowing that new self to be born from the ashes. We then move into Kether, whereby we merge with unity and become one again. Merge with the primal essence. And Kether is the Neptunian / Plutonian sphere that is ruled by Archangel Metatron, who is the architect of the multiverse itself. So it's important to see Kether as a window. Once you have been through Kether, you will find yourself coming back to the bottom of the tree. You'll lightning bolt down the bottom of the tree and ground everything back into the physical experience. This is a lesson for really showing you that in order to evolve, we had to experience that separation. But once we experience that separation, we make the commitment to journeying back to our place of oneness. So Kether is a very important process of initiation, but is more of a window, not a state of oneness to attach to, but is kind of a state of non-being, a being of pre-manifestation that you have to merge with in order to then understand the deeper architecture of the cosmos itself and why everything is the way it is from the perspective of your personal microcosm. One person is not going to have the same experience. So as you go through each of these spheres, you are ritually opening, if you're using occult methods, you're ritually opening each of the spheres, being exposed to the transmutation process, and then you are basically going to move on to the next sphere. Whilst you're in each sphere, the Archangel is overseeing the trials that you are receiving. What this whole process is really there to do is consolidate your karma and facilitate you living out the karma that you need to live out in your physical, tangible experience in order to connect with your true will. So things are going to change rapidly within the Tree of Life, particularly if you're doing it the occult way. Things are going to change rapidly in your life when you go through the tree itself. It's very efficient. It's typically quite quick to start working, but the change that takes place is significant. Okay, it can be quite quick, so quick that it can feel like your head's spinning. Okay, not that you're moving through the tree quickly, but in terms of the changes that are taking place, it can be quite hard to actually grasp what's actually happening when you are going through it, simply because of how much karma you are living within your day-to-day life. So when you move into the tree itself, you are literally consolidating your karma and making a commitment to jump onto a different timeline whereby you are making the commitment to very much commune and connect with your higher self and start living life in a way that is at your evolutionary benefit. So the purpose of the tree itself is to move you out of a space of perpetual karmic cycling and into a space of evolution, continuous evolution, the continuous process of journeying back to unity, which is exactly what your soul has come here for. It's absolutely epic, but it's very much about living the self-development. This is why the Tree of Life and the Tree of Death, to be honest, is so powerful, because it encourages you to live the work. Okay, you are living the work day to day. It's not just something, oh, I'm just going to sit down and do this when I have time. But when you're doing it the occult way, it's melting into your day-to-day life, and your life will become the tree, which is the whole purpose of this process, learning how to exist within the multiverse and learning how to face the world around you as a vessel of evolution. In the tree, everything in your world around you becomes an archetype of evolution. Once you finish the spheres, Then you have the pathways. So the pathways, when you're undergoing occult Qabalah, it's best to undertake them separately from the spheres themselves, simply because they are more liminal and trigger more drastic perceptual shifts when you are merging your consciousness with them. So the pathways are much more pivotal in nature, whereas the tree, in terms of the spheres within the tree itself, are more progressive. You enter into a sphere, the energy is progressive, and then you master the essence, and then it comes back down in intensity. With the pathways, it's much more erratic. It's like you're entering a maze. You'll enter one pathway, your consciousness will go like that, and then you'll enter another pathway, and then the consciousness will go like that in the opposite direction. Yeah, so it's literally like you move into one pathway, your perception will shift drastically, and then it will shift again as you move into the next one. So the idea is that you're then moving in to each pathway one by one, going through that transmutation process. And there are double the amount of pathways that are with the spheres, so the pathways typically take a lot longer than the spheres to complete. In terms of how long the initiatory process takes is highly subjective, particularly if you're self-initiating. There's nothing stopping you from opening up every single sphere in a single sitting. You could do that, but you're still going to have to go through the initiations of each sphere individually. So it's advised to spend a month within each sphere and or pathway to very much ensure that you are effectively grounding and transmuting the energy. When you get to the higher spheres, so from Darth onwards, you will absolutely spend longer in Darth, the Abyss, and longer in the Supernal Triad. We're talking like months, the best part of 6 months in that respect within this region of the tree alone. Okay, maybe even longer. It depends on the individual. Okay, this is where things get really serious. So there is no rush. Okay, but the 1 month guideline is a very good guideline within this initiatory process. The same with the pathways. So if you keep at it and you don't have breaks throughout, and sometimes it's good to have breaks, then you could probably complete the entire tree. When I say complete the structure of it anyway, the spheres and the pathways within the space of a few years. Okay, so it is quite a long process, but even after that, you're going to be moving into a bigger process of initiation, what is actually beyond the tree itself, which are far less tangible realms of angelic initiation and transmission that take you to much deeper levels of evolution beyond structure and form itself. And this is what we call Sephiroth initiation. I have a video on this specific concept itself. So I think that's everything that I needed to talk about in today's video. Very quick, very concise, but I think that is everything. So I have different methods that you can use for initiation. On my Patreon, you will find Echoes of Kether, which is a very powerful e-grimoire that you can use for the entirety of the Sephiroth, the 10 Sephiroth, the Abyss, and the Pathways. I've also got the Enochian system, which is a very good system of Sephiroth initiation that is on the Patreon as well. Or I offer one-to-one tree of life mentoring, where you have my mentoring services for a year or a year and a half if you feel called to, at which point we will work through the tree together. I will leave a link to that in the description as well. But for now, thank you guys, hit like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.